I'm gonna go ahead and begin. Um, I'm gonna be talking to you all about my journey in academic entrepreneurship and providing a bit of a roadmap for those who are interested in this as a pathway. And I'll start off by sort of contextualizing our discussion in the context of intersectionality as well. But what I'd love to begin with is asking you all for those of for those who are interested, why is entrepreneurship of interest to you? And let me see if I can pull the chat so I can get it. I can see your responses. You can feel free to type this into the chat or you can come off of mute and voice it to me. Yes, Jennifer, you get that cardio done. That's awesome.
I'll hop in. I was once told by another entrepreneur that if you have a PhD without an LLC, you're not fully maximizing your degree. And so I think that especially now when academia is no longer as certain as it used to be, it's a perfect time to start maximizing my degree.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. And how do you pronounce your name? Elise?
Yeah, Elise.
Elise. Thank
Yes.
you, Elise. I appreciate that. That is a wonderful saying. I will put it in quotations for my next presentation, but I wholeheartedly agree. If you have a PhD without an LLC, you are not maximizing your potential. Maya says bigger opportunity for impact, benefits of being your own boss, who's a better employer. And Jennifer says for longevity and control over your own work and disseminating it in ways that make sense to you and is sustainable. Wonderful. No, of course, no right or wrong answers here. I'm just curious. And this helps me to get a sense of who's in the room and what you all are sort of thinking about. Um, and let's see. So I will go ahead and progress the slides, but if folks are having other thoughts, feel free to continue dropping those in the chat. I want to start by saying that something that doesn't always get named in conversations about entrepreneurship, and I think it's really context. So the traditional funding system, as we all know, was not designed with everyone in mind, especially Black women, women of color more broadly. And just thinking about, the sort of prized funder in academia being, for most of us, being NIH, and thinking about the current pay lines for NIH. Right now, they're around 14% for an R01, and that's extremely competitive. But for those of us who, have research that centers communities that have been historically dismissed, like my own research focused on Black women's health, um, the barriers for folks like us compound, right? So our work gets scored as not significant enough. It's not relevant to other populations. And our methods get questioned, methods that we develop, methods that are, designed by women of color. These are the methods that get questioned, that get scored lower, et cetera. Our community engagement efforts are not rigorous enough. And in addition to all of that, we also see that DEI funding is actively being diminished, dismantled in real time. Um, and relatedly, on the entrepreneurial side of things are no better. In fact, they're even worse. So when we look at venture capital, or is basically money that people gather to support their business endeavors, um, venture capital received by women of color is less than 2%. For Black women specifically, it's less than 1%. So when I'm talking about entrepreneurship today, I want you to hear this not just as a way to maximize your career potential, but I want you to think about this as a power strategy, as a way of saying, I'm not going to wait for a funding body or a study section to validate the importance of my ideas, of my work. And think about it as an opportunity to build the infrastructure you need to do the work anyway, to do the work how you want to do it. So that said, I asked you this question. What if instead of spending our careers asking for permission to do the work we are called to do? I know a lot of us, this work is it's not just about a career. For a lot of us, this work is spiritual. This work is sacred. This work is deeply meaningful to not just our passions, but our purpose. So again, instead of asking permission to do the work we're called to do, what if we built the infrastructure to fund it ourselves? So this idea for me is it's one that is my own, but it's inspired by a Black woman entrepreneur, Rachel Rogers. I picked up her book, We Should All Be Millionaires, in 2021 after starting my current business that I'll tell you all a little about shortly. But this book, the opening for me was profound. I absolutely loved it. She talked about how there are a lot of social causes that she's invested in. There are a lot of social causes that other Black women, women of color are invested in. Um, and how we're often applying for, searching out, fundraising for money to support this work, and she's on something different. She's on a let me do what I need to do to get the money to support the work that I'm trying to do. She started out as an attorney turned entrepreneur, and this is sort of, in a way, I think how she justifies wealth building. I know sometimes the idea of wealth building is contentious, especially for academics. A lot of us feel like capitalism is a huge problem, and I'm going to come back to that. I don't think capitalism is a wonderful thing that we should be striving toward. So hold on to that thought. We're going to talk about it in a little bit. But I want I want you all to sort of digest what Rachel's argument is, what is at the center of her argument, rather. Thinking about the accumulation of wealth as not a selfish thing, but as something protective, generative, and a form of independence. And thinking about how generational wealth acquired through entrepreneurship can allow folks to break these cycles of dependence. And in the context of academic entrepreneurship specifically, this is liberating. Financial independence in this way means researching what NIH won't fund, serving communities that foundations often overlook, and building what your institution might be too rigid to imagine or too slow to support. Um, One of the businesses that I started a few years ago gave me that opportunity exactly, the opportunity to do research that at the time NIH felt was too risque. And not just do the research, but also do the work in real time, like quickly. I didn't have to wait months for an IRB approval. And some of the feedback that I got from that business was it's just incredibly inspiring. So I'll share more about all of this shortly. But for now, I want you to just sit with this idea of what entrepreneurship can do in the context of your work and your life. All right, so revisiting the discussion about capitalism being problematic. Absolutely. I mean this wholeheartedly. It's a real tension. I don't want to gloss over it. Capitalism, as many of us know, has been a historically extractive system. Uh, we can also throw research in that book. It's been used to exploit labor, concentrate wealth, and deepen inequity. That's documented. It's real. And this is the end, not the but. Entrepreneurship does not require you to replicate those patterns. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship but worried about capitalism, you don't have to think about entrepreneurship in that same traditionally extractive way. The question for you is what are you building for whom and what are your values? There are a number of different business entities or structures that can allow you to divest from capitalism. Um, for example, a cooperative, that means you and your team share the ownership, or a B Corp means you and your team's mission is legally protected, even if you're selling something. So B Corps are basically like nonprofits with a corporate structure. Speaking of nonprofits, you can run a nonprofit in and of itself. That's another structure that you can use as a business. My business, the Thrive Institutes for Professional Development, is a mission driven for profit LLC. My mission is baked into everything I do. Could I have structured it as a nonprofit? Absolutely. But I didn't necessarily want the grant dependency that's often commonplace with 501(c)(3)s. I wanted to build something self-sustaining. So that was my choice. But you get to make your own choices and you can make them intentionally. Just a quick note about what I want for you all after I finish speaking with you all today. I hope that you all will know some key steps for commercializing your research. Um, I also hope that you will know commercializing your research is not your only pathway to entrepreneurship as an academic. I want you to know how to use your existing skills to build something sustainable and why entrepreneurship might be one of the most powerful tools we have to do that. If y'all are still with me, drop a oh yeah in the chat. Let me see. Y'all ain't sleep, are y'all? Let me see. Okay, let me see. Okay, all right. Y'all with me. All right. So, as Matt mentioned, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce myself. And let me see. There we go. So, Jasmine Abrams, I am trained as a health psychologist, but I'm currently in public health as a research scientist at Yale. I'm also the founder of the Thrive Institutes for Professional Development. Our company is focused on supporting researchers, particularly those at research intensive institutions, um, maximize their productivity and simultaneously their wellness, or rather, maximize their productivity without sacrificing their wellness in the process. And that is like my it's like one of my passion projects, but doing that work is also a big joy for me because of how personal it is to my own journey in academia. But my work is mostly community based. I also do health services research, and I focus on examining psychosocial factors that impact both health behaviors and health outcomes. Most of my work has centered on sexual, reproductive, and maternal health among women of African ancestry, and that's both in this country and abroad. I've raised multiple millions to support my research and professional development. At last count, it was around the 10 million mark. Um, I mentioned I'm a research scientist at Yale, but I also want to say that this is my dream job. The flexibility that comes with my position as a research scientist is um, far greater than what I had as a tenure track professor. And yeah, just there's something about being able to say yes to what I want to say yes to and say no to what I want to say no to. And there not be consequences regarding whether or not I'm going to be able to keep my job. Um, and that I'm like, that sentence has caveats, but the general sentiment remains true. I began my entrepreneurship journey in graduate school. So if we have any doc students in the room, you know, you don't have to wait to get the PhD to start this journey. And that was in 2014, and I founded four companies overall. I will talk about each of them shortly. Let's see. So I want to say that it wasn't always this way for me. You know, I want to flash back to when I was in graduate school. I'm going to tell you all a short story because I want you to be able to learn from my mistakes and the amazing people who helped me along my journey. So again, flashing back to graduate school, this was a picture of me when I was working on my PhD. And I was your typical doc student. I worked around the clock. I miss spending holidays, sometimes birthdays with my family and friends because I felt like there was always so much work that needed to be done. There wasn't time to have off. So I rarely took vacations. There wasn't any time, but there also wasn't any money when I was in graduate school. And I was just trying to survive that elusive balance of research, teaching, mentoring, my assistantship work, community work, and the side job that was, illegal for me to have so that I could make ends meet. And I was almost always exhausted, stressed, overwhelmed, and I longed for the day that I could graduate and be a real adult. I used to call my mom and say, I want to be a real boy in my Pinocchio voice. And that, like, I was longing for the day where I could be a real boy, a real live grown up. And the closer I got to graduation, I ended up having two very influential conversations. One with Christina Hood on the left-hand side in the white shirt, and the other with Michelle Pope on the right hand side in that black shirt. So Christina and Michelle were in graduate school with me at the time. Christina was a few years ahead, and we came in at the same time. But I remember talking to Christina shortly after she graduated, and I thought she was living her best life in her new tenure track position. So I called her for some hope and inspiration. I said, Christina, how's it going? Do you love it? Give me some insight. Give me some hope. And Christina said words that I will never forget. She said, all the overwhelm and stress and exhaustion you feel as a graduate student. I was like, oh, girl, yes, of course, I'm living it. She said, well, multiply that times 10,000 and it still will not compare to the stress of the tenure track. I'm constantly working. I never have time for myself. I'm always overextended. I'm always doing too much. I feel like I can't make any real progress in my career and my research because I'm constantly handling a fire that needs to be put out. And doing my work that way is not going to move the needle forward on my career. And I was on the other end of the phone, like, what have I gotten myself into? I was still in graduate school, but our program was like really encouraging, pushing, training people for the tenure track. And that conversation gave me a lot of second thoughts about academia. I actually, like, literally the next week started looking for jobs outside of academia. And I ended up having a conversation with another mentor. This was very happenstance. I didn't ask him. He just started talking about how much he loved being in academia. He talked about his flexible schedule. He talked about loving being able to research what he's interested in and passionate about, teaching in his area of expertise, material that excites him, and being able to mentor students and travel the world. And I was like, I want those things, And, he was further than tenure track. He was tenured full. And I thought, well, maybe if I stick it out long enough in academia, it'll get good enough for me to actually love it. So that's when I applied for and landed a tenure track position right after graduate school. But the other important conversation, and both of these shape my future, was the conversation that I had with Michelle. So I remember telling Michelle that, I had just landed this tenure track position, and she was like, that's wonderful. Congratulations to you. And she's like, what are you hoping to do with your career? And I was like, well, I want to, do all these things for Black women's sexual health. And then I'm trying to have a family as well. I want to get a good job. I want to build generational wealth. And I want to be able to give my children a future that I didn't have. And she was like, let me just pause you on one part of that. I hope that you will never be able to build wealth from a job. As a person who only knew working for other people at that point, I was like, well, what am I supposed to do, Michelle? you know? Michelle was actually an entrepreneur herself. before she went to graduate school. And while she was in graduate school, her and her husband owned heating and cooling companies. Their first company they sold for over $1 million. And this is like, I met her in 2010. So, God only knows how much money that is now. But I ended up actually going into business with Michelle. So we founded our first company, Research Unlimited, while we were working on our dissertations. We recruited our participants both in the hundreds. She did dyads, I did Black women. Um, we recruited our participants in less than 2 months. And faculty in our department took notice and started asking for help. We were helping people for free. And then one of my mentors said, hey, stop. People will pay you for that. We had no idea. So we put one contract out there. It was like $1,000. The person bit, we said, oh my God, people will pay us for this. We started doing more and more contracts. Within our first 6 months, we had our first six-figure contract, and we knew at that point, okay, we have something. So just remembering the early days of this business coming to life, assisting other people in the department with their work for free, and then actually moving into it being a profit generating company within 3 months. I mean, we started growing very quickly. So we applied to an accelerator, which is a program that will help you establish and grow your business. The accelerator gave us some non-binding capital. That means they did not want equity in the company. They supported us basically with the equivalent of a grant to invest in our company. And we used that to hire our first employees, to get an actual office space, to build a little more infrastructure in the company itself. And that became my goal, to be the force behind the business. Um, was not something that I was really interested in. I wanted to hire and build infrastructure so that we could be the face of the company. Michelle had a different idea, and we were misaligned in that. Michelle felt like it was important for us to be both the face and the force. And so, long story short, that misalignment led to us getting a divorce. AKA, I ended up having the company buy me out. And I left that venture. And a few years later, I started another venture called the Spice Experience. So, some of you in the room know that I do sexual health research. I mentioned that. Some of you know specifically that I've done research related to sexual pleasure. And the research that I was doing in sexual pleasure was so exciting to me. There were so many gaps for women's sexual health and sexual pleasure. And I am thinking about the long arc of research in academia. And I'm like, it's going to be 10 or 15 years before I can get these people a program to help them have orgasms. Like, that's too much. It's too long. So I started in this company with the idea of helping women increase their experiences of sexual pleasure. And this is probably one of the most traditional examples of academic entrepreneurship because I was using my university related work, my research to inform my company's product or service offerings. But, at its heart, this was built out of a desire to close the orgasm gap and train women to better pleasure themselves and their partners through knowledge acquisition and skill building. Um, I absolutely loved doing this work. This was at our first annual event. Um, we had almost 100 women attend our first event, and the reviews from that event just lit me up. People were like, "You saved my marriage." Like, I I had zero interest in sex, and then I came to your workshop. I learned things about how to pleasure myself, how to pleasure my husband, and it completely changed the game for us. Somebody conceived a child on the night of this event. I mean, the reviews were just It's the stuff of dreams for me, okay? And unfortunately, I was still not very skilled in sharing the load at this point. So I took on way too much with this business. Simultaneously in academia, I had applied for and won 3 grants, which is like, oh my God, you hit the academic jackpot. But the issue was it was too much. It was too much. I had 3 grants as PI. I started this new business. I had family stuff going on. I know a lot of you will feel me on that. And I ended up not being able to continue with this business because I ended up experiencing some pretty severe mental health challenges as a result of being completely overwhelmed. And I've talked about this in other research salons or intersectionality research salons. But in addition to being overwhelmed, I was completely undersupported at my institution as well. Um, but I'm still an entrepreneur at heart. This thing is in me. So shortly after I dissolved the Spice experience, I ended up founding a company called Tuzo Designs. I had designed my own personal academic website, and people were always asking me, "Who did your website?" I did it. Can you do mine? Sure. So I started a company focused on doing academic websites. And this company actually led to my current company, Thrive. The conversation that led to Thrive was with somebody I went to undergrad with, um, who was a millionaire. And I was just calling him for business insight with Tuzo. And he said, how much money are you making from this? And I was like, I'm making about $15,000 a year. And he's like, and how much time are you spending on this? I'm like, well, 15,000 is about, like 8 websites for me. And I probably spend like 10 to 15 hours on each website. And he's like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And my mouth is sort of I'm like, that's good money. He's like, you are spending too much time for that little bit of money. And he started to talk to me about a business structure where you are not trading your time for money. And that concept really sort of blew my mind. So he really was talking to me about the knowledge economy, and how you can train people with knowledge that you have acquired without being there face to face, one on one, continuously providing the training. You can train hundreds of people if you'd like at one time. And that's how this company was birthed, the Thrive Institutes for Professional Development. He asked me, he said, what's something that people come to you for like frequently? Advice. What are people asking you about? What are people hiring you to come speak about? And I was like, career growth, professional development stuff. And I'm like, I'm having these conversations on a weekly basis with people for free. And he's like, that's it, do that. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna try it out. I put together a program we launched in the fall of 2020. The first launch, I made $20,000. So more than double what I had made in my first year with Tuzo, more than what I had made in a year, like of actual profit in my first year with Research Unlimited, and also with the Spice experience. So for me, I said, okay, I have something. Um, and the company has grown since to provide other offerings, some of which we'll talk about toward the end of the presentation. But it also was something I deeply enjoyed. If you remember, I was already doing this with people for free, right? In addition to the mentoring that I was doing, I was also having these random one-off conversations with people who were very curious about how I was growing my career. And so I turned it into a business. Um, Not just to monetize off of my knowledge, but to also save people. The lessons that I've learned in academia were hard won. Like, people didn't give me this information in a workshop. I learned all of the things that I've included in my trainings by doing fire by baptism, baptism by fire, excuse me. And I just wanted to highlight that, over all the companies that I've started, I've learned so much. And I've been able to apply, the lessons that I learned from each company have been applied in each subsequent company. So I'm really grateful for all of these lessons because I think it allows me to be a better businesswoman, even a better academic. But before I continue, I want to share with you all what entrepreneurship has given me more broadly. Um, One, liberation. So I feel like I have more ownership over my career and my life. Um, when job opportunities are on the table, I feel more confident in being able to say no. That's not it. It's not enough. I don't want to work there. I don't want to work in that way. And that's because I know I have business income that I can also rely on. And that is related, seamlessly to the financial empowerment piece. Having income streams beyond my salary um, contributes directly to this greater sense of empowerment and ownership. And then it also has enhanced my capacity for building generational wealth. I don't know if my children will take this business on. It might be dissolved when I'm done, but I'm hoping to build something that can live beyond myself. I do think what we are building, what we have built so far, is something that people need. It's something that has been very useful to people. So I hope it doesn't dissolve when and if ever I'm ready to move on from it. I also appreciate having the opportunity to do work that is in alignment with my values. So not only can I merge my scholarship with my advocacy goals, my equity goals, but I can also do things that genuinely excite me, right? Excitement, creativity are also in alignment with how I want to live my life. Those are some of my core values. And the work just feels more purposeful sometimes when I'm able to create the conditions in which the work happens. Research autonomy, I am not because my salary, I guess if you want to call all the money that I make my salary, is not entirely dependent on my research. It gives me this freedom and space to do work again that generally lights me up, makes me excited, makes me feel joyful. I do feel like I'm able to amplify my impact, both in my like work that's related to research or my entrepreneurship that's related to research, and then also in my other entrepreneurship that's not related to my research. I'm able to conduct research in that space still and bring it to life, bring it to market or solutions faster than I ever would be able to in academia. And then it also helps me expand my influence and my visibility. So not just showing up as a researcher, but as an innovator and a thought leader as well.